Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video, I'll be running through all of the best players to be bringing into your FPL sides ahead of Double Game Week 32. So let's start off by talking about Crystal Palace assets. Of course, they've got one of the two Double Game Weeks in 32, followed by another Double Game Week in 33. Now, Game Week 32 itself isn't the best Double Game Week, Man City and Newcastle, but it is still a Double Game Week and it's worth attacking. Now, defensively, you're not really expecting many clean sheets from either of the next two Double Game Weeks. Man City, Newcastle, Bournemouth and Arsenal all have great attacking acumen, so you're not expecting miracles at the back. Although, if you've already got the likes of Henderson or Munoz, you're obviously going to be very happy to hold on to them. You're hoping for save points, maybe the odd clean sheet from Henderson, but Munoz is a much more appealing player to have in your side considering the attacking threat. We saw that on show in game week 31. He's got 9 attacking returns so far this season already, and you'd back him to get 1 or 2 in the next couple of game weeks as well. So Munoz, still a great pick. I won't talk about him at length in this video because he's already well owned, but if you don't have him already, I think he still makes a lot of sense to go there. Now up top as well, not on the graphic, but quickly to talk about Mateta. He's not been getting fantastic minutes since the injury, and he has looked maybe a little bit affected by it, but a great goal in game week 31 against Brighton, looked a little bit closer back to his best in that game week, got brought off early still, but his replacement Nketiah came on and got red carded. So we know that Mateta's minutes should be a bit better in game week 32, and they've been building him up anyway. So I think that we're looking at 80 to 90 minutes in probably each of the next 4 fixtures across the next 2 game weeks for Mateta. So both of those two options, Munoz and Mateta, great options if you don't have them already. I think the big decision for a lot of managers still working out the best Palace triple up will be in midfield, that being either Eze or Sarr. Now, Eze has been in red-hot form recently and has undoubtedly been the better of the two players since we got back from the international break. He, of course, got his first goal for England over that international break and has looked brilliant ever since. So, if you're one of the managers that chases form, and I do think form does exist, it's just not necessarily easy to predict. If you're one of those kinds of managers, I think Eze makes the most sense if you can get there. 1 million more expensive, or 1.1 million more expensive, I should say. So, it's not easy to. But I think right now, given what we're seeing on the pitch with our own eyes, Eze is probably slightly clear of Sarr. However, across the season, Sarr has been a fantastic pick. The data is better than Eze in terms of XG per 90, 0.34 versus 0.27. XA per 90, so that's the assist threat, 0.21 takes on 0.14. And he's gotten 5 more goals than him in the Premier League this season. Now, of course, he's only got 1 more attacking return in total, but there is extra weighting towards goals. We know that you get 2 extra points for the goals and assists, so that does carry some sort of significance here. At 1.1 million cheaper as well, if you're a bit strapped for cash, I still don't think Eze is so far clear of Sarr, even with the recent form, that you can't look at Sarr as an alternative if you need that 1.1 million elsewhere. I still think Sarr's a great pickup. If you've already got him, I would not be taking him out or making the move across to Eze now. I would hold tight with him because the data is still good across the season, and across these 2 game weeks, 2 double game weeks, I still think Sarr is worth holding. I think if you're going in fresh now, I'd probably just about edge towards Eze, but it is very marginal. And if that 1.1 million can be used better elsewhere, this is a very minor upgrade. And I think that there possibly will be better ways to spend the money. If you've got loads of cash and it's not a problem, then I would probably go towards Eze. But like I said, it's a very tight call, and either one could end up on more points come the end of game week 33. So Newcastle with the other double game week. Man United and Crystal Palace at home is probably a more appealing double game week than Crystal Palace. But of course, Crystal Palace have 2 in a row, so that was probably where the priorities lie. However, if you don't already have triple Newcastle, this will also be a great jumping on point with 2 very appealing home fixtures this game week, followed by Aston Villa away from home after their Champions League tie, and then Ipswich in game week 34, which, although will be popular for a free hit, those of you that don't have a free hit left are going to want to buy players that can run through to the end of the season, and Ipswich at home in 34 is going to be one of the fixtures to target. So Newcastle assets, if you don't have them already, are going to be popular this week and onwards. In defence, it's between Livramento and Burn. Trippier, with the injury concern, kind of rules him out of contention mentioned, Shah's a little bit expensive. So Burn and Trippier at the same price point at 4.5 million are both going to be popular. If you don't have them already, I think Burn probably shades it if he can get through Leicester without a yellow card. At time of recording, of course, Sunday, we haven't played the Leicester game. If he can get past that game without a yellow card, he'll still be only on 8 yellow cards going into game week 32. And therefore, even if he picks up a yellow in the first of the 2 fixtures, he won't be banned for the second. If he gets a yellow card against Leicester, then I'd probably just go towards Livramento instead, just for that safety net, because you don't want to get into a situation where Burn picks up 2 yellow cards on the bounce and misses the second game in the double game week, Crystal Palace at home. Livramento doesn't have that risk, of course, way fewer yellow cards. So if you want to go safer, Livramento's your man. But come Monday night, we'll know either way. So you can probably just hold off on the transfer until that match is out of the way. A quick word on Isak before we move on to the midfielders on screen. Of course, he's an injury doubt going into Leicester on Monday night, but we expect him to not be that far away from playing, even if he doesn't play against Leicester. So I don't think he's going to be too much of a significant risk going into game week 32. He will also be a popular triple captaincy option for those of you who still have the chip, captained by a lot of managers as long as there is no fitness doubt. So his effective ownership is going to be really high. And considering most of us already do own him, I don't expect it to be a massive problem for many of us. But if you don't have him, I would still prioritize getting him as quickly as possible, considering the data is fantastic. He's going to be captained by most managers, and it's a good double game week as well. Now, moving on to the most interesting part of the Newcastle discussion, and that is probably the midfield. Any of you not already tripled up will have probably a debate as to whether Gordon is worth that extra 2.3 million over Jacob Murphy. Now, Gordon's injury concerns going into Monday night will probably put off a lot of managers, but if he does play against Leicester, I think he could be a nice popular differential pickup to bring in ahead of what is a very interesting looking double game week. And we know historically, if he's fit, he gets great minutes. So will be a good player to have from now to the end of the season. Now, obviously, most managers won't go there until we get the green light that he is fit and available, but he does have much better XG threat than Murphy. So if we do get that positive news on Monday night against Leicester, and maybe he looks quite good as well, then I do like him as a differential pickup. I think the problem lies in the fact that he is so much more expensive than Murphy that most of us don't have that sort of money spare in the bank to use on Gordon over Murphy. And Murphy's data isn't exactly terrible either. 0.42 XGI per 90 for someone who's just a smidge over 5 million is still very, very decent. I've got him on a wild card and I'm very happy with his performance so far. Let's see what he does on Monday against Leicester. But I think for the saving you make over Gordon, I still would probably prioritize him because that 2.3 million can definitely be used in other positions to great effect. If you've got loads of money spare and it's not a concern to you, you can go differential with Gordon if, of course, we get good news on Monday. Or through the week as well, we get significant news that he's at least training and looks likely to start that first fixture against Man United. But I think in most scenarios, that 2.3 million can be used elsewhere. And Murphy, for me, still takes priority. I think some people are a little bit concerned that if both Gordon and Barnes are fit, then they might start taking minutes off of Murphy. But Murphy's not really been much of a starting risk for most of the season now. And I think Howe has settled on the fact that both Gordon and Barnes are much better on the left. And Murphy's tracking back his work rate on the right is really, really valuable. So I don't think in 2 very big home games against Man United and Crystal Palace, he's going to risk that too much. And I think that whilst he could get taken off around the 70th minute mark, he should still start both games. So for me, Murphy is still the better of the 2 picks pound for pound. But if money is no object and we get the good news on Gordon, then you can look at him as a differential with slightly better attacking data. So on to Aston Villa, who don't have a double game week in 32, but do have a great single game week fixture against newly relegated Southampton. And the eagle-eyed of you will notice I'm wearing my Southampton top in solidarity with my club, who have been relegated in record record time this season. It's been an absolute shocker. And you will have to think now that for the rest of the season, they will, even more so than ever before, probably be a team to target. Not that they weren't in the first place. Aston Villa are next up for them. So given the fact that Aston Villa have a double game week in 33, it would be an ideal onboarding scenario to go for Southampton to attack a really, really good fixture and then have a double game week afterwards, even if it is Newcastle and Man City. Now, if you're looking defensively, I don't think there are too many Aston Villa assets that I'd be massively keen on buying. Although if you've got the likes of Konza or Martinez, you're probably holding on to them in the hopes that they start the next 3 fixtures across the 2 game weeks. However, Southampton away from home, although it's a good fixture on paper, what is worth noting with Aston Villa and what would put me off of buying them this week in most cases is the fact that they've got PSG either side. So a massive Champions League knockout tie against PSG will await them in the midweek before game week 32 and in the midweek after. And given the turnaround as well being quite tight, you'd expect that Aston Villa use Southampton as an opportunity to rotate, and therefore bringing in any of their attacking assets will have a lot of risk attached to it. So at time of recording, I think it's going to be very hard to determine any Aston Villa players that are definitely going to start the Southampton game, but maybe we get a little bit of a hint after the PSG game. Maybe we see an Asensio or a Rashford only get 20 off the bench, and that would probably put them in line to start the Southampton game. And given the fact that both of them have looked really decent recently, if we can get significant minutes out of them in the Southampton game, that could be really big for attacking returns. So let's wait to see what happens in the PSG first leg. But without that information, I think the most locked into the side would arguably be Morgan Rogers in terms of the attacking assets we're actually interested in anyway. Now, Morgan Rogers' attacking data is the worst of the lot, but on the eye, he still had significant attacking output this season, and as we know, is a phenomenal player. Emery rates him. He's been getting very good minutes, and even during busy periods of the season, he's still been used pretty significantly throughout. So I don't think minutes are at risk necessarily, but Southampton is going to be the opportunity, if they're going to use it, to maybe rest him. I think, again, the PSG tie is going to be important here. If it's still in the balance going into the second leg, they might use Rodgers off the bench against Southampton, or maybe start him and take him off around about 60, 70 minutes if the game is won. But I think out of all of these 4 interesting assets, he's the most likely one to get minutes in all 3 of those matches against PSG in both legs and Southampton. Even if he does get taken off early, that could still be a very decent pickup, even now, considering his price point. I think once we get past the PSG game, Asensio or Rashford are going to pick up in popularity if either of them don't get a start in the first leg. If they don't, I think either of them could be really interesting as midfielders with good price points and much better attacking data than Rodgers. Rashford, you would think, is on penalties as well. So if either of them don't get good minutes against PSG, I'd back them to start Southampton and then possibly even start the double game week against Newcastle and Man City, given that Emery has kind of put his flag down and told us through the first fixture who his preferred 11 for the second fixture might be for PSG. Whoever doesn't start the first one is probably not going to start the second one, you would think, unless things go significantly wrong, and therefore be likely to start Southampton and the double game week against Newcastle and Man City. So for now, I think you hold off, and I think all of these players are a risk going into game week 32, but maybe we get some important intel midweek against PSG. I think the one of these 4 players that I wouldn't buy almost no matter what would probably be Ollie Watkins, mainly because the player that you're probably looking at selling to get to him would be Alexander Isak. And I think that makes a lot more sense after Isak's played his double game week in 32. And then you can trade Isak to Watkins ahead of Watkins' double game week in 33, when Isak's only got a single game week fixture against Aston Villa. Again, with Watkins, even though the data's great, even though the minutes are generally pretty good, you'd think that he starts both PSG games and therefore would be a significant doubt against Southampton. And if I was going to be taking a guess right now, I think what Emery's most likely to do is play Watkins in the first leg of the PSG game, maybe Rashford plays off the bench and gets 20, 30 minutes, but then Rashford plays the Southampton game, maybe gets 70, 80 minutes in that one with Watkins coming off the bench for 10 through that centre forward role. That would be my guess, but let's wait and see what happens in the PSG first leg, because that will be really important as to determining which of these Aston Villa midfielders will be most interesting, if any, to pick up ahead of Southampton in game week 32. So I wanted to round off today by talking about a few other popular assets ahead of game week 32 that will be interesting to a lot of you. And I just wanted to give my views on a few of them. Starting off with Bukayo Saka, will be a popular transfer in, although he hasn't actually started a game since coming back from injury as of yet. Now, of course, minutes have been improving. So 30 odd in the first game in game week 30, followed by 45, so a full half of football in game week 31. You'd expect that to continue to increase week on week. However, the key reason I probably wouldn't be prioritizing him ahead of game week 32 is, much like Aston Villa, Arsenal have got a hugely important Champions League clash against Real Madrid either side of game week 32. That probably means, for me anyway, that he'll get reduced minutes in game week 32. They'll wrap him up in cotton wool. They'll make sure they don't take any risks, and they'll make sure that they can play him as long as possible in both of those Real Madrid clashes. So for me, I don't think he's a priority buy. If you've got him already, then you're happy enough to own. He could get 60 odd minutes in game week 32. I still think there's a chance that he gets benched and they rest him as much as possible, maybe bring him off the bench if the situation requires it. But for me, there's enough of a doubt on whether he starts or not that I probably wouldn't prioritize it myself. Game week 33 is another story though. Real Madrid will be out of the way. It's another week of fitness in his legs, of match fitness specifically as well, which will be important to him. And then it's a great double game week of Ipswich and Crystal Palace. That is personally where I plan on bringing in Bukayo Saka ahead of game week 33, probably for Cole Palmer. Now, looking down, the Brighton attackers are going to also be interesting, with Leicester at home in game week 32, especially if you're on a bench boost 32 strategy. They're cheap, they've got good attacking data and a great home fixture. So it makes a lot of sense to go there if you're looking at a cheap striking option to sit on your bench most weeks, or perhaps rotate in and out as an 8th attacker. But crucially, if you're bench boosting in 32, they are going to be popular. João Pedro got his rest in game week 31, so you'd expect him to come back into the starting lineup in 32. And Danny Welbeck got 90 minutes in game week 31, having only gotten bench appearances for quite a while before that. I would personally prefer João Pedro because he's got penalties, and more often than not, he's reliable for minutes. There have been patches this season where he hasn't been though, so there's no such thing as a guarantee there. But out of the two, I'd probably prefer João Pedro. Now, I'm going to go past Nottingham Forest defence very quickly because Evan Nilsson will also be an interesting, cheap striking option. In great form at the moment, better than João Pedro, you would say. And although the fixtures aren't quite as good as João Pedro, if you're a form over fixtures kind of manager, which I know many of you are, Evan Nilsson has been absolutely on fire recently. So maybe if you want to weigh that a little bit higher than the fixtures, then Evan Nilsson could take priority at around the same sort of price point as João Pedro, could be more interesting. It is worth noting, though, that Bournemouth have fallen off in form a little bit as of late. They haven't really been as good as they were earlier on in the season, but that hasn't stopped Evan Nilsson. He's been in great form and the minutes have been good. The attacking data's been good. The underlying numbers have been great. I still like him as a differential, cheap striking option alongside the likes of the Brighton boys. Now, I'm going to round off by talking about the defenders. I've got Lewis Dunk on here as another alternative Brighton asset that might be interesting to you. 4.2 million at time of recording, very differential, and should be absolutely nailed into the Brighton defence for a great home fixture against Leicester, who have really, really struggled to score. I'm recording this before their game week 31 fixture against Newcastle on Monday night, but absolutely nothing I see in that fixture is going to change my mind on how I rate the Leicester team. They're not very good going forwards. They're not very good at the back either. So striking options and defensive options, Brighton against Leicester is always going to be an interesting pickup, especially again, if you're on a bench boost strategy, a 4.2 million starting defender with some goal threat in a great home fixture is always going to be very tempting. Now, I quickly wanted to round off by talking about the Nottingham Forest defence. Now, didn't keep a clean sheet in game week 31, but of course, across the season have been a very reliable defence, still got good effective ownership and good fixtures between now and the end of the season. Starting off with Everton at home in game week 32, so another interesting defence to target, ahead of 32 if you're looking at a bench boost 32 strategy. Williams and Milenkovic both going to be popular. Williams obviously cheaper, so probably will become the more popular of the two assets. But I think if you've got the money, Milenkovic is still the one I'm more interested in. I think he's got great goal threat from set pieces. So if you want to give yourself the best opportunity of striking lucky and getting a big haul, I think Milenkovic, if you can afford him, makes a lot of sense. However, that's nothing against Williams. He's still got good underlying attacking data and is probably at this point in time, especially considering the injury to Aina, as locked into that starting 11 as Milenkovic is. So if you want to make the saving, Williams also makes a lot of sense. And crucially, mapping forwards towards the end of the season, game week 36, they've still got a chance of a double game week, including Leicester at home. So another bit of future planning there. Bringing in a Nottingham Forest defender now could serve you well towards the back few game weeks of the season. As we wrap up today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the show. And of course, if there are any players that I haven't talked about today, leave them in the comments below and I'll try and get back to you before the game week 32 deadline.